What's unique about our company is we use science fiction as a business tool to help our clients get a competitive advantage, frankly. There's tremendous value in using science fiction in business. First thing is providing a little bit of clarity around complexity. So, like, emerging technology is very complex, hard to understand, hard to connect the dots for the average person. Take that, create a story about it, it becomes relatable, it becomes personalized, you can have an emotional connection with it. The second thing it does is it invents new IP. So when you take an emerging technology, let's say augmented reality, and you start to tell stories about the implications of it, very quickly you'll start to create use cases. The other value, the third value, is it creates a very compelling North Star vision of where an organization could be. As you know, with disruptive innovation, it's never a straight line. It's never, here's the story, here's the vision, ... and we're there. What it does is I like to say there's a linear path and there's an exponential path. Most companies are on a linear path. Exponential path is really what our work is designed to do. It's designed to help companies embrace these amazing technologies that we're just talking about and then apply them in unique ways. So think of, we're successful if we've been able to bump them on a new trajectory and help them think about their categories and their business in a very different way. When you look at, I think, companies that are truly extraordinarily successful at disruptive innovation, like Amazon, maybe like Apple used to be, I think what they do is they have, this is how people are going to be, this is what excites us, this is where we think the future is, now let's just go ahead and build it, rather than conditions and quadrant maps and contingencies. And the way that we do it is it's a process of co-creation with the client. So it's not, a client might give us a brief and say, what's the future of our industry? So let's take an example, one that I did a few years ago. What's the future of chocolate? And this particular client was very interested in 3D printing as a technology. So what we did as part of our process is the client will give us their research, and then we'll go into a workshop with the client. And the goal of the workshop is to co-create with them these preferred future stories and narratives. So we'll create utopian stories, we'll create dystopian stories, and essentially what this is raw material for us. Once we've done the research in the workshop, we'll then brief close to 200 science fiction writers, a big global, call it a panel, a creative panel. And we'll say, here's the brief, and they're all under NDA, and we'll say, here's a brief about the future of chocolate. Just like you would in any science fiction story, help us tell a meaningful story where 3D printing and chocolate are important in this particular future. And it's really cool. It's basically a way to get different speculative futures, and then you kind of pick the good ones. There'll be some bad ones, there'll be some really good ones, there'll be some that are half-baked. And then we'll go back to our client and say, these are the 2 or 3 we think that align nicely with your strategy, with an innovation plan. And then the final stage is generally creating some kind of narrative for the client that they can then use as a change management tool. So that could be a video, it could be a comic book. But for this particular client, we did 3 comic books around different areas. Or it could be some marketing material, some thought leadership material to broadcast to the outside world. Or it could be actual experiential futures, which is really cool. So we might create a space in the client's headquarters where people can say, this is chocolate of the future world. And you can go in and it kind of tells a story about how people could consume chocolate in the future with 3D printing. So the work we did for NATO was fantastic. They do tremendous work at looking at the science and technology and the trends. Some of the best work we've seen. They gave us all of that. They wanted a new way for their commanders and for their folks who are responsible for anticipating new threats and new technologies. They wanted a new way to engage them and give them insight into this content. And then we created 10 short stories, a short story anthology. And what we did is we picked 10 of we thought the most interesting and compelling future scenarios grounded in the information that they provided us, and wrote about 1,000 to 1,500 page stories with illustration. That was then produced in a book. That book was then handed out to 28 of the member nations. And then we did a workshop in Brussels, in Mons, at their headquarters, where we read the stories, and then we had a very lively discussion about the implications and what NATO does today and what they potentially should be doing as a result of this potential future. That was great. I've been very impressed with the way NATO and the military have generally embraced disruptive innovation. You would think that the military, maybe to some extent, is more rigid and less flexible, but in my experience, I've found them to be quite creative and quite open to these ideas. Occasionally, I like to say the type of work we do, it's a bit of a contact sport. You got to get dirty, and it's tough because you've got to slay some sacred cows. You've got to say no to the things that you have been doing and say yes to new things. And for us too, it's more helping shift belief in terms of what's possible and changing behavior change, really, and change management. That's really the tough part. Generally speaking, CEO level or executive level of companies, they embrace this, which is interesting. They want change, they want disruptive innovation, they want it now. They understand it. Junior, more younger executives, people starting out their career, they're open to it, they embrace it. It's the middle management, people who are comfortable in their careers, have been doing the same thing. They're the ones who are the most threatened about this sort of work because they're incentivized to continue doing what they've been doing well. That's how they get their bonuses, that's how they get paid. They want to keep their jobs, they got mortgages, families, bills. Where it works well and real change can happen is there's two conditions, say three. The first condition is that there's somebody at the executive level who's the heat shield, who's protecting the team or the person or the individuals working on this sort of work. The second condition is finding those unique people in an organization. Every organization has them, even the most traditional conservative, who aren't afraid to buck the trend, who know the business well, and really, in a deep, intuitive level, understand the importance for change, and don't care if they lose their jobs. Finding that person, giving them that role, empowering them, protecting them. The third condition is, I think, using the stories to help sell it in, using narrative to help get people bought in. And if you can create those three conditions, I've seen really profound things happen, but it's not easy. Change, this sort of work is not easy.